and it hits me, oh my gosh, this is that triangle.
You know, there's explanation for everything that occurred in the Rendlesham Forest incident that doesn't involve aliens at all.
It was completely silent. It comes right over our heads.
He saw a classic flying saucer, really, standing in the clearing.
He turned over to my father and held his hand, and he looked in his eyes, and he said, "We're not alone."
Welcome to Podcast UFO for our live show. We're live every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the Dark Matter Radio Network. Please remember to visit the website podcastufo.com for past episodes, blogs, and forums. During the show, feel free to participate live in our chat room. And don't forget to like us on our very active Facebook page.
Hello, everyone. It's Martin Willis. Welcome to the show. And we are live in College Park, Maryland. I almost said Virginia. We're pretty close to Virginia. And right a stone's throw away from Goddard Space Flight Center, or Flight Space Center, or whatever. You know what I mean.
Space
NASA.
Flight Center.
Yeah. And you just heard Ray Stanford. Welcome to the show, Ray.
Hi, good to be here.
Yeah, and also we have Tony Angiola. I knew I'd screw that up. And we have Ben Moss here as well. They came up from Virginia to join us in the show. There's not going to be any news this evening. I gave Alejandro the night off. And thank you, supporters. So this is going to be a 2-hour show. And supporters get to listen to the second hour for only $1 a month or more. And I want to thank all of my listeners either way. We do have a chat room, and that's at podcastufo.com. We also have a phone number you can call, and that's 603-967-4030. I want to tell everyone that we have Art Bell back on this very station, and that is, it is midnight Eastern Standard Time, but it's 9 p.m. Pacific Time, and he runs until midnight out there. And it's a great show. The sound quality is amazing. I hope you can check it out. And it's really great having Art back, and I'm actually kind of proud to be on the same station that Art's on. And it's been a lot of fun, these shows we're doing live. I was really nervous to do a live show in the beginning, and now, you know, when I screw up, well, that just happens, and you just kind of move on and go from there. But one thing I don't have to worry about is a guest not being here when I call him. He's right here beside me. And again, jump in the chat room if you'd like and pose some questions, or you're welcome to call at any time at 603-967-4030. You might want to write that down. And we have a number of people in the chat room, and we're ready to go. Again, I said welcome to the show, Ray. It's been a real pleasure being here the last few days. I don't even know if we could cover the things we've gone over. Amazing things. Thank you for welcoming me in your home.
My pleasure.
Yeah. Why don't we just, I figure at some point we got to talk about Socorro, because it always comes up. You were one of the very first people there, and so many revelations have happened. And a lot of people might say something like, oh, that's such an old case, but there's still a lot of significant things coming forward about that case, so I'd like to talk about that.
Okay.
But you have been, why don't you give the new listener your background, basically?
Well, I heard about Socorro within 2 days after it happened, and it happened on Friday the 24th of April, 1964, and I got there just about 2 hours after Dr. J.L.N. Hynek, the Air Force scientific consultant on UFOs, got there on the 28th. And thus, the next morning, I was invited by Dr. Hynek to join him and the police officer witness from Socorro, Lonnie Zamora, and the State Highway Patrolman, Sam Chavez, who was the first policeman to arrive on the site after the event, and thus to be involved in the complete interview with them and to see it reenacted from the standpoint of where Zamora got out of his police car and went about 15 feet toward the object, leaving 35 feet between him and the object, and then all hell broke loose.
Right. And one of the things you said to me that really impressed me yesterday was that Lonnie was, in your opinion, one of the most credible people you ever have known.
Yes, I consider him perhaps as absolutely incredible as anyone that I have ever interviewed. Not only that, but I should point out that the late scientist, Dr. Lincoln La Paz, who tracked meteorites from the sightings of seeing the meteor in the air glowing through the atmosphere. There was an event one night in New Mexico, and after Lonnie Zamora came out and reported this incredible encounter, La Paz came back and said, look, I want to say that this man is an incredibly honest and actively good observer. He said he was the most accurate report that he received. He took the coordinates of the elevation and the azimuth of the object from Zamora, and when he got it from all the other people, they put it together and located the fallen meteorite. He said that Zamora was as accurate as any human could have possibly been. He said this man is a very exceptionally careful observer. So, but it was my experience with Zamora, too, that led me to appreciate not only his objectivity, but his total and complete honesty.
Right, right. And about you, Ray, I can't believe how many sightings you had. I tried to get you to tell me about how many you've had. You've had so many, and not only have you had them, but you've had this rule of thumb to always carry your camera and your video camera with you, or your movie camera all the way back to the 60s.
Right, 50s.
50s, all the way back to the 50s. You have caught so much on film. I can't believe what I've seen these last couple of days. Amazing. And would you care to guess how many sightings you've had?
No, I really, you see, I don't, the only ones I really keep track of are the ones where I got either movies, and these are not electronic films. These are absolutely old emulsion film movies, in one case in 16 millimeter and the others in 8 millimeter and Super 8 millimeter. And I keep track of the ones where I got hard evidence. Otherwise, I consider them, I record them, but I don't keep account of them because there are a lot of things, and it's just like all the things out there as anecdotes. They're just anecdotes. I think they count for science when you have hard evidence.
Right, right. But now I'd like to just pass around the room a little bit right here. And Tony Angiola, can you tell us? Hello there. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. My name is Tony Angiola, and I've been with MUFON since the 90s. I also want to take this opportunity to thank you for having us on the show.
Oh, sure.
And I also want to thank Jan Harzan for hooking us up with Ray. I don't want to tell the background on exactly how we met Ray. I'll let Ben do that because he gets most of the credit, for this connection, because we spent over 100 hours with Ray by this point. But basically, I investigate UFOs in my spare time. I presently work full-time for a small IT company called Friendly Systems in Chantilly, Virginia.
Wait a minute, was that a plug?
It kind of was, because I promised my boss I'd say something. But in my spare time, Ben and I, we do a lot of cases together, and we collaborate on many cases, and it's a lot of fun. We try to have fun any chance we can. And like I said, when we come here to Ray's house, it's like an education. It's like a college education in physics, photographic analytics, you name it. Ray's got a vast knowledge.
Dinosaurs, don't forget that.
You know what? We haven't touched on that yet.
Oh, really?
After 100 hours, we haven't gotten to dinosaurs yet. He slips it in every now and then. We inadvertently learn something about a notosaur, but Ben and I try to steer the conversation back to ufology, which we're still learning, and Ray has so much to teach us. So
yeah, and Ben, you and I met in Phoenix.
Correct.
And you actually found me with my podcast UFO T-shirt out there, and in which you're wearing one now. Thank you. And it was great to meet you, and you really encouraged me even more. I already said that I was coming down to Ray's, and you really encouraged me. You said, you've got to get there, and thank you for that.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you have to experience it to really know what Ray has. You have to be here and sit through his presentations and look at all the evidence he has. It's fascinating. It's something that you wouldn't even believe until you saw it. It's just been an experience. Ray's like a mentor to us. He teaches a lot about photographic evidence and the footage he has, the things he's captured, the things he's seen, the life he's had is just very interesting. I think there's about 10 more books in Ray, and we could probably write 3 or 4 ourselves about Ray with all the things we've experienced. But it's been a great meeting Ray. We got lucky. I was looking for some Socorro footage that I'd seen on a TV show in the 80s, and that got around to Ray, and through some mutual contacts, we were put in touch with Ray. I finally found the footage. It wasn't as detailed as we thought, but it brought up the whole Socorro thing again. And Ray has showed us some very interesting things about Socorro that I think are going to bring that back into the limelight.
Great. And Ray, this question is for you. One of the conversations you and I've had in the last couple of days is and this may rub a few people the wrong way, but this video and film evidence you have, you're kind of reluctant to put it out there, and because you're afraid of what could happen with ufology getting hold of it. And
no, I'm not really afraid of that. It's just that I know how many people with unfounded knowledge who don't have a good background can look at something and make up all kind of fantasies about it. What I think you're talking about is a photograph that I took on August 24th, 1964. And the reason I'm hesitant to release it is because in the first place, my friend Bob McGarry and I were there to do magnetic measurements on the dynamite shack to see if there was magnetic residual effects from the event back in April. And then we had an appointment coming up with Lonnie Zamora at 2 o'clock when he got off police duty. And so we're rushing through, and I took a picture of Bob McGarry standing in front of the dynamite shack to give a size reference and also to focus in the door which had who owned the dynamite shack welded on the front of it. And I took that picture paying no attention at all to the horizon, certainly not expecting UFOs to show up. I mean, you're there on a hot day just doing what you think is the job you should be doing. And it turns out I recorded something incredible in the picture. I never looked at it seriously at all. I mean, it was just a picture of a dynamite shack, and since the magnetic measurements I decided probably were not of really scientific importance, I really didn't look at it over the years. But back about, I guess, 2.5 years ago, it's hard to say now, on the internet I saw someone ask a question. He asked, does anybody know who owned the dynamite shack? Now, I don't know why I wanted to know that, but I felt I had the answer. I remembered the photograph I had taken, a black and white photograph, and this was, I think, 124 days probably after the Socorro event, and it was probably, I would guess, it was somewhere after 1 o'clock in the afternoon, or just around 1 o'clock in the afternoon, on a bright day there in Socorro, and I had taken this picture. Well, I pulled it out and realized when I enlarged it on the view screen that I did have where the dynamite shack had come from on the door. And I noticed something back on the western horizon. I noticed more than one thing. There was an object off to the left, a little less than a half degree above the southwestern horizon. And then over across on the right side, of the far right side, there was another object. Strangely, the object on the left horizon looked like it could well be the shape of what Lonnie Zamora had seen of the object when it had its landing gear folded in, an ellipsoidal object, an egg-shaped, in other words, object. But on the right side, it was more astonishing. There was a thing that was also about a half degree or a little less above the and these are based on objective measurements from the photograph and knowing the focal length of the lens and so forth. But this object there looked like the Socorro object with its landing gear deployed. And I thought, oh my gosh. And to the left of it were three things that looked like they were way off in the distance, probably three discs. One of them was just above a break in the mountains, a low place in the mountains where thermal gradient would be pretty much differential across there compared to the atmosphere above it. And so the one nearest that lowest place actually shows apparently optical warp from the thermal gradient across the low place between the mountains. They were beyond the mountains, apparently. And to make matters worse, off in the distance, would be far to the southwest of Socorro, there's a thing that looks for all the world like what the textbook UFO would say is a mothership. And this is just too good to be true. It's so darn good, it's astonishing. I keep looking. Sometime in the middle of the night, I get up and turn the thing on and look at it, and I say, is this possible? Neither Bob McGarry or I saw anything, but we weren't looking. These objects are all within less than a half degree above the western horizon. We weren't looking. We certainly weren't expecting UFOs out there. I mean, nobody in the right mind opinion goes to a place where something happened 124 days earlier and expects to see the same kind of objects. But anyway, that's what happened, and I discovered these things there, and I want to stress this to everybody. I am not an entertainer. I'm not here to entertain. I'm not here to prove to anyone that UFOs come from any particular source, be it ET or extra-dimensional or anything else. I'm here to try to get hard data that is diagnostic of the propulsion and that tells us something about the level of technology that might be represented. This picture is gee whiz, and I do wish Lonnie Zamora alive to see it. I think he'd be thrilled. I hope to contact his daughter again and show it to her, who's been in contact with me. But I really don't care if anybody believes it, and I may not release it, because when this is seen, it's going to be people are going to say it's impossible this man could have had this luck. Well, if people think I have created a hoax and waited 50 years to reveal it, they better think again. I mean, if I had faked a photograph on this, it's on this old film, and all the other pictures on it taken at the site, we can prove that it's the old film. And so help me God, I had no idea these things were there, but I'm thrilled to look at them, and you guys have had fun looking at them. But it doesn't have the scientific import of physics so much as the better material I have from color movies and still photographs.
Well, to me, I have to tell you this. Before I saw that, we had a conversation about it.
Right.
And I was a bit skeptic about it. I was like, oh, that's just, that's kind of far-fetched that this could actually happen. And then I actually saw it today. First of all, I saw the original picture and the size of it, and it's the very tiny objects, but once they're blown up, I think it's the most incredible picture that I looked at in the last 2 days. I really do. I think it's the most awe-inspiring and most valid picture of. It looks exactly like the craft that was drawn, exactly with the landing gear down, perfectly. I mean, everything about it is a perfect replica of what Lonnie Zamora described.
Well, yes. Even the landing gear, they're at the kind of angles that you described to me that I put in the illustrations in my 1976 Socorro book. And but let me say that your positive emotional reaction to it, though, is more based upon, I would suspect, as with most people, a long-held desire, gee, I wish I could have seen what Lonnie Zamora saw. And in feeling that way, when you see it, there's naturally a great sense of fulfillment that you finally seen it. But scientifically, this black and white photograph, as amazing as it is, doesn't hold the scientific water that the movies and incredible telephoto still shots in daylight that we have from the standpoint of diagnosis. For example, where I have the films of the beam ahead that can enable an object to travel hypersonic speeds without pushing a hypersonic shock wave in front of it, without, in fact, creating one. And these kind of things are the things, to me, that are important. Truly, you're right. There's a great emotional reward in the Socorro photograph, I admit it. But because I don't like the way I've been treated by the public, I was called a liar when I said that Lonnie Zamora saw an inverted V with 3 lines across it. And I hinted it in the back of my Socorro book in 1976. Most people didn't believe me. They believed NICAP, who said, well, and I'd warned them that they should put a caution in there that the thing they were saying, which was an arc with a vertical arrow with a line under it, they were saying this was what Lonnie Zamora really saw. I told them, I said, there's serious question about this. Well, subsequently, after Lonnie Zamora died, I told that Lonnie Zamora was simply covering for the government, that he had been asked by Richard T. Holder, the captain that was in charge of the Northern Integrated Holloman White Sands Range on the day of the event, that he had been asked to tell the wrong thing, to tell something different than what he saw. Nobody believed me. People accused me of destroying the Socorro case and making a liar out of Zamora if he believed it. But the truth of the matter is, Lonnie was a wonderful and a political and a man who loved his country. He had served in the Army, and he complied with the request of Captain Holder to do this. Fortunately, Captain Holder's son, Richard T. Holder, Jr., saw the flack I was taking for announcing this after Lonnie had passed on, and his daughter wrote me a very sweet letter, and she appreciated the eulogy that revealed this, and she thanked me for it. But I took flack. Finally, but Richard T. Holder, Jr., Captain Holder's son, wrote me, and he said, look, I see the flack you've been taking. He said, I want to set the world straight. He said, I want to give you a statement, because my dad told me that he asked Zamora to obfuscate, to hide the real symbol, and to provide a substitute, and he did. And Richard T. Holder, Jr. suddenly provided me with a signed statement revealing this. And the next reward that again overcame some of the negativity I'd had from the UFO community was that I found at the National Archive with James Fox there, I actually found a letter from Hynek written on September 7, 1964. And he actually draws the inverted V with 3 lines. And it's in a handwritten letter to Project Blue Book. How can we deny this? On top of this, Rob Mercer in Ohio, a MUFON person in Ohio, has uncovered documents, Blue Book documents, in which Hynek telephoned Blue Book from Socorro and said that Sergeant Chavez, who was the first one to get there and interview Zamora, said that Zamora told him it was inverted V with 3 lines. There's additional evidence as well. So I've been vindicated. But I don't like the flack, frankly, and these people mostly have not apologized to me, and I don't intend to give them anything as nice as this photograph, because, frankly, I don't like it. If I get some apologies from certain people, I might come out, but frankly, I'm not here to entertain. I'd prefer to show this evidence that you've seen to physical scientists and engineers.
Okay. Well, there are people that are a lot of people that you dealt with aren't around anymore, the ones that were giving you trouble, I'm sure.
No, they're around.
They are around.
They're around,
okay.
yes.
Well, I take that back.
Rich Reynolds, for one.
Okay. Well, a number of people are saying, people are disappointed you're not showing the picture. I understand.
That's fine. I'm not here to convert people to UFOs.
Yeah. Okay, but I think they want us to move on because the picture's not going to be going to be told. So let's go. For the listener who has not heard you before, Ray, I'll talk about how you got interested. You were interested at a very young age. Was it
right?
A lot of people saw like a comic book or a book or something that got them fascinated in the subject. What set you off in the beginning?
Well, I'm so old that there were no comic books on UFOs when I got interested. The truth of the matter is, I was born in 1938, and Kenneth Arnold reports of the objects that he saw June 24, 1947. Well, when school started the next year, of course, I guess it was the 3rd grade. But anyway, I was 9. And I was swinging on the swing one day in the schoolyard, and the principal's wife was out there watching us kids in the little farm town of Odom, Texas. And I got to thinking about the flying saucer reports I'd heard. And I jumped off the swing. Don't ask me why. I jumped off the swing and walked up to this lady, the principal's wife, that I'd never talked to before, and I said, Mrs. Shelton, when I grow up, I'm going to investigate what these flying saucers are, and when I find out, I'm going to let the whole world know. She said not a word. She did a military-style about-face instantly and pranced off across the schoolyard, which is probably the best thing she could have done because it annealed my determination to do so. But I watched for UFOs after my parents and I moved to Corpus Christi from Odom. I watched from the flat roof garage from age 9 until age 15 and never saw anything that I thought was a UFO despite hundreds of hours of watching. So I'm not an imaginative person. But on the other hand, I was talking to my first serious girlfriend on the telephone on the night of June 10th, 1954, and a knock came at the door. I refused to answer it, and pretty soon it became a bang at the front door, and the man at the door said, "Listen, I'm Officer Ritchie," he was a policeman, "from across the street. Ray, you've been watching for flying saucers for as long as I have known you. There's one flying over your house. All your neighbors are out watching it. And why don't you come out here?" I said, "Goodbye, Emily." And I took off, and I saw my first one. So my virginity went.
Was it, which virginity went? Oh, the flying saucer.
The UFO virginity.
Oh, I got it. Yeah. I got it. So, Ben, the next question's for you. Ben, both you and Tony have both been here. What do you think about all the different things that that you've seen since you've been here?
Well, Ray definitely has some footage, some photographs. The photograph we were just talking about that are very, very interesting. I think that he's captured some incredible technology that's operating in our atmosphere. You have to be objective. Nobody can say where this is from, what it is. I could probably truthfully say we didn't make it. I think that the evidence speaks for itself. And like Ray said, if somebody who wasn't worried about being attached to the subject, with the PhD, scientific background, that really, really wanted to have a look at some hard evidence about what this is captured on film or photograph, needs to come take a look at what Ray has and then make a determination, because the evidence is there in the footage, old emulsion film, as Ray mentioned, not tampered with, still in the box, actually, still on the reel type frame or whatever format he's captured it on, and the photographs speak for themselves. The films, are old. We haven't seen some of them, but and the photograph, the Socorro photograph we talked about, I've seen it. It's there. To me, it vindicates what Lonnie said. And anybody that has any questions about Lonnie, that's just another thing that shows he was telling the exact truth, and he was very good at describing what he saw, because it looks exactly like what the drawing turned out to be that Ray did. And I think Ray's just in the right place at the right time and has captured some things that really needs to be seen by people who can talk about it in a very high-level scientific way, and not have armchair quarterbacks trying to debunk or talk about it when they don't even understand what the technology is that he's captured.
Right. And we're going to, in the second part of the show, we'll talk about, kind of the things going on. We'll touch on the things going on that you've investigated and things like that. So, Tony, I'll just throw this at you. What was, for you, some of the things that you've seen here that just kind of like stood out?
Yeah, basically echoing everything Ben just said. And on top of that, I want to say that Ray is one of the few people still around that knew people like George Adamski, and just about every single person that had anything to do with ufology in the time span that ufology has pretty much existed. So on top of that, he mentioned that he only likes to talk about those things that he filmed and photographed. Well, I can tell you he's actually done more than that. He's done drawings of things that he's seen. Today I scanned 4 or 5 different documents from 1954 that not only had detailed reports, some of the best reporting you can imagine, things we don't really see today in reports. As much information as we try to capture, say, in the MUFON CMS database, because it's all digital, people don't really have the opportunity to draw, scan, upload, say, diagrams like you would in the old days, let alone accurately detail exactly what you saw, the way that Ray's done in some of these old-fashioned reports. And I wish I could just laminate every one of these pieces of paper. But I was scanning them, and I noticed on the back he had these very detailed drawings. I can easily read what he wrote, look at the diagram, and understand exactly what he was trying to report. And again, you don't really see that too much, and maybe it's because we're in a new medium and we need to educate people on how to properly report what they've seen, or even better, have investigators properly dissect what people are trying to report. But from everything I've seen here, I'm not smart enough to understand it, and I'm learning all the time, and I hope to just keep learning from Ray. And again, he's got more stuff hidden in these walls than we can ever imagine.
Yeah. I feel the same way. I agree with you. It's like some of the stuff is just over my head. But, Ray, can you talk a little bit about how you think, through the different things you've actually shown all of us here in this room, how you think the propulsion... You said that you think there's 2 different types of propulsion. Yes. One is for low height or whatever, 20 feet or below. And then once they get above 20 feet, and you think most of the craft you film have this type of propulsion?
Well, what I was telling you in that respect is simply that in all the reliable cases that I've studied that seem credible to me, what happens is, whether it's a disc or whether it's the object at Socorro, the object seems to use a primary drive, whether complex or simple, we don't know, but it comes in and stops usually about 20 feet above the surface. and then it lowers down seemingly with a different propulsion mode to a landing or to hover just above the ground. When it leaves, it does not take off from high speed from the ground. It, again, rises to about 20 feet and then takes off, sometimes at high speed, sometimes somewhat more slowly, as was the case at Socorro. But this suggests that there might be something endemic to the primary propulsion drive that would be dangerous near the ground. Could it pull up objects and slam them against the craft? Could it throw objects around that might injure somebody or something? We don't know the reason. But I know I go way back to, I was talking at a Civics Club meeting in 1957 in Corpus Christi, Texas. And an old gentleman waited until everybody left. He said, I waved around. I didn't dare say this in front of my buddies, but he said, 2 fishing friends of mine and I, back in, I think it was 1952, he said, we were fishing along. He said, all of a sudden there was a hum, and lo and behold, right in front of us, we saw this dome disc. He said it was small, about 20 feet in diameter, and it had a clear dome. He said, I couldn't believe it. He said, I'd never believed in these things, but here were these 2 little guys looking at us. And he said, I didn't know what the heck to do. He said, I knew they weren't human because they were too small. And he said, stupidly, I guess, he said, I raised my right hand and waved. He said, I couldn't think of anything else to do. He said, and guess what? One of the 2 guys waved back. And I thought, oh, I haven't gotten into something. He said, then it's raised up slowly to 20 feet and then took off like a bat out of hell at kind of an angle, going up pretty steeply, though, in the sky. Well, this kind of behavior has been reported all over the world. I think of close encounter cases in France, Italy, the United States, South America, and this is a consistent thing. In fact, if anybody told me that they saw a UFO come in high speed, plop on the ground, and then plop off without going through this precautionary mode, I would be somewhat dubious, because it is consistently reported, and again, it was reported in Socorro. And I want to say about Socorro, people think, well, that's unique, we've never heard of that before. Well, I'm sorry, they better read my book. I have a whole chapter of cases before Socorro, of similar cases, and I myself, since Socorro, have seen, and the people with me have seen, Socorro-type objects within 400 feet. The objects are real, this elliptical-type object. I should tell people that depending on its seeming energy state around its surface, it can be like Zamora saw, and it can just as quickly become the blackest black you've ever seen, or it can spin a spiraling blue-white pattern around it and look like bright electrical blue. And I've seen this. And I want to say one more thing. I may have left the impression earlier that I'm definitely not ever going to release this photo. I don't want to say that. I may release it, but I'm going to have to feel the right circumstances and get a right feeling about it, because I don't want to slip into being accused of being a UFO entertainer like I think certain major UFO organizations are, and they make a mistake doing. I want to focus on my research. And so I may decide to release it under the right circumstance. I don't want to sound exclusive and say, no, I will not, because I would love to share it. But I may wait till after I'm dead and then ask it to be released, so I don't have to take the flak from predictable sources.
Okay. All right. Now, one of the things you had shown me is sort of like video and photo evidence of the propulsion with the different swirling and all that. And let's talk a little bit about the McMinnville UFO. You looked into that. You actually looked into that to prove it, or thinking it may have been a hoax. But why don't you
That's
talk
right.
about that?
I was extremely dubious of the McMinnville photographs. Because I didn't like, here they saw something incredible, and yet when the word got out to an individual that happened to have told about it in town, when investigators came to find the film, they found the negatives under the couch, all dirty, fingerprinted, and just filthy, both photographs. And I said, well, why would anybody? Well, let's keep in mind that they were farm people. She was out feeding her bunnies, and she saw this thing. She called her husband. He came out to camera, and he got pictures. But I took these pictures. Once I had learned to do a bit of image processing, I took them onto my, I scanned some high resolution. These are not copies out of books. I had copies that had been provided me that I was told were taken made from the original Trent negatives. High resolution, good copies you can get aside from the dirt on the photographic negative. And I scanned these, and I was frankly looking for supporting wire or wires. I thought I might be able to prove a hoax. Much to the contrary, I was shocked at what I found. The first thing, by just a little contrast enhancement of the scan, I could immediately see an expanding column of darker downflow under the middle of the object that went right down and curved toward the witnesses. Well, this is real interesting because that's photo 1. They stated that when they photographed photo 1, just before the picture was clicked, its edge was kind of toward them and it rotated up toward them, and both Mr. and Mrs. Trent said, shortly after that raised up, the woman said, a terrible blast of air hit me. And he said basically the same thing. Well, you can see the blast of air. And the reason you can see it, I believe, is that I learned this from a physicist friend of mine in Europe when he was analyzing one of my films of UFOs taken right after the sun had set. He pointed out that when you're looking into the west and the sun has just set, the light is highly polarized. Well, when you have a condition that would cause refractive index differential from a hot downflow in a column underneath the object, it's going to refract differentially than the air around it. And it just happens that the camera was looking basically west, and the light was highly polarized, and so this is an ideal situation. If light had been unpolarized, it wouldn't be so easy to see a refractive pattern in a thermal current underneath the object that's spinning. But in this case, it's beautifully clear. I challenge anybody that's got a good photograph of it to simply increase darken the midtones, and you will see the spiral downward. Why certain famous people that claim they've analyzed these photographs miss this? Well, I can say they're either got a closed mind or they're blind and are not thinking very far. After all, when they said a blast hit them, one should look for evidence. I wasn't. It just confronted me when I was looking for suspension lines. Now, the second thing is more evidential. Nobody in ufology has ever pointed this out, but real UFOs, when photographed in daylight, and it's especially obvious when the light is highly polarized, as it was during the Trent photographs, as I described. When you photograph objects under these conditions, if they're real, there will be multiple images of the object, ghost images, arrayed around them. They almost look like they were in sequence laid over each other, and you can see these. Take a look, and you can often, when you look at the naked eye, you won't see this. What you'll see is simply a bluer sky around it than the rest of the sky. That's because these images are being generated by whatever means at extremely high speed, and you are flicker fusing them into a blue blur. But when you take photograph at high shutter speed, you will be, your camera, your film, or your imagery, electronic imagery, will catch these images that are so fast the perception cannot record them, or at least register them. And you will get these, and by golly, I can show you pictures that I took from a movie film taken at the entrance to Andrews Air Force Base here on February 16th, 1986, and I can show you hundreds of images of the object, some of which are substantially clearer than the object itself. I can show you photographs taken from Goddard Space Flight Center in broad daylight that I took under the same circumstances, highly polarized light. And one of the images you saw today is 2.2 times the diameter of the actual thing I was watching, but it's sharper. It's not as saturated, but you can see the seeming construction panels in it and so forth. But here's the thing about Trent. By golly, much to my shock, there in photo 1 were beautiful multiple images of that amazing-looking thing that's in the photograph. And they're not as clear in photo 2. It had moved off of the west a little bit, and the backlighting was not as polarized. Could be the reason. I can show you the images of it in photo 2, but they are, in my opinion, undeniable. They are beautiful in photo 1. Now, that takes a little more sophisticated image processing to bring the range of subtle densities out that will reveal these, but they're there, and I can show them to anyone. This made me so convinced that I have said I will swear my life on the authenticity of the photograph. I don't care what skeptics like Vicente Juan Ballesta Olmos in Spain says, that these things were fake. There was a report which he published from people saying they're scientific. They said, now let us suppose this. Therefore, if this, let us suppose this. Therefore, this would be fake. This is not the way you do science. You don't suppose anything. You look at the evidence and make deductions from the evidence. These photographs are genuine. I don't care what anybody says. The Trents could never have thought of making a downflow underneath the thing. When they said a blast hit them, they never referred to seeing it. They didn't. It's too subtle. But the camera recorded it. And likewise, these multiple images, they knew nothing about this, neither do 99.999% of UFO researchers, because they look at UFO photos for only one reason. They ask themselves, will I be able to convince my skeptical friends or the media that this is an extraterrestrial craft with ET in it or little green men in it? This is silly. They should be looking at these things for physical evidence that illuminates the physics involved. And so that's my feeling on the Trent photographs. All
right. I'm sure there are some good people out there as well trying to investigate these. Yes?
Oh, sure.
Yeah. Okay. I just wanted to clarify that. Well, let's take a little bit of a flip. And what's your opinion on, you know I'm going to ask you this, don't you? Billy Meyer's photos.
Wow.
I want you to...
That's not worth even speaking about.
No. I want you to talk... I would like
Okay,
to...
let me tell you some of the things I know.
That's what I want you to talk about. We had this conversation, and you were telling me about what you saw in these photos.
Okay, let me tell you about some of the things. The late Wendell Stevens. I could talk about him personally if you like. But anyway, let me tell you what happened. He used to let me go through his files, and I was looking for correlations to things that my project and I had filmed. Because there are correlations, nice correlations out there. Not many, but there are some. And it's nice to have them, because in science, replication of a phenomenon is extremely important. But one Sunday, I was there at his place, and he was letting me go through looking for these correlations. And he said, Ray, I've got to go over to the mall. I'll be there about an hour or more. He said, I'll be back, but feel free to look through anything that's here. Well, he had the walls of that room. He had bookshelves all the way to the ceiling, and he had photo albums on these. These were not in the days with electronic photographs and images and your computer. In a tiny little drive, you got everything. These are all on his walls. Well, I looked up there, and I already knew that Billy Edward Meyer was fake. Everything he ever produced is a fake. And what I did, I looked up there, and here's Billy Edward Meyer, album after album. I pulled out one album, and here was a black and white photograph. It showed a pyramid-looking thing in the background and a clearly cloth-stuffed dinosaur in the foreground that had buttons sewed on for eyes. You could see there were 4 holes in the button, and you could see the thread holding the button in place. I said, fun and games. Okay, I'll show this to Wendell when he gets back. Well, I picked up another one, and it said that here was a series of photographs. I forget the name of the place there in Switzerland. He said Semyasis time-scanning spacecraft is coming down, is luring down in front of the camera. Well. Guess what? Here it is. I took the closest one first, where it was nearest the ground. I look up at it. It's in the photograph. It's a color photograph. And here is a plate turned on potter's wheel. You can see where the fingers went on the potter's wheel as it was finishing off the bottom plate. You can see where it stopped. You can see where the fingers stopped and the ends of the fingers are. And to make matters worse, I mean, you can tell it was on a potter's wheel, but it's being held to another sort of plate on top of it. And guess what? It's being held with masking tape, and it's peeling off on the edge. I look up at the dome. It has these square supposed windows or whatever Semyazi would claim they were. And they're day-glow stickers that you can buy in a drugstore. And they're square day-glow stickers, and one of them is peeling off. You actually see the back side of it. I mean, the corner is peeling up, and you can see it. So, fun and games. And I looked at the others, and the same thing. As you get further away, a little hard to see, but you can see all this. So, at about an hour and a half, Wendell comes back. And I said, Wendell, I said, my God, have you seen this ridiculous thing with this pyramid and this so-called dinosaur? And he says, oh, yes. I opened it up. I said, this is what I'm talking about. I want to make sure you know what I'm talking about. He said, yeah, sure, I know the picture. I said, do you know that that's a stuffed dinosaur? Can't you see the button? Can't you see the holes? Can't you see the thread holding the button in? And he says, yes, I know that's there. I said, then why did you publish this? There's one book, it's hard to get a copy of. I've got a Xerox of it, that shows this thing. He said, I said, wait, I've got one more thing to show you. So I pulled up the picture of the series of Semyazi's craft coming down with the day-glow sticker peeling and the masking tape peeling and the plate that was made on a potter's wheel. And I said, Wendell, didn't you see that that's simply a plate? He said, well, I kind of thought that. I said, well, didn't you notice the masking tape and how it's peeling? He said, yeah, I know the tape's peeling. I said, how about that day-glow sticker? He said, yeah, I know it's a day-glow sticker and I know it's peeling. I said, then why did you publish some of these photographs, ones that don't show this to clear? Why did you publish some in a newsstand UFO magazine? He said, Ray, the truth of the matter is, that exposing hoax doesn't make any money. This makes a lot more money when you claim they're real.
Really?
And he said that. So help me God, he said it.
Wow. I was thinking maybe the aliens were on a budget,
Oh, well, yeah, probably so. I guess they had to get some cheap masking tape to hold their craft together. Let me tell you about another one, though. Now, this I checked. My wife, she retired just in January last year from the Goddard Space Flight Center after 30-some-odd years there. Had a very responsible position, by the way. She was, I'll advertise her, she was a contracting officer, technical representative over the entire equipment and supply section of the last 4 Hubble Space Telescope servicing missions, which she received NASA's Exceptional Achievement Award. But anyway, Sheila and I looked at the photographs that he claimed were taken from Semyazi's time scanner. He claimed they went up and they saw the Apollo-Soyuz docking. And he took a picture of this great docking. There's only one problem. When you look at the picture, you can see the curvature at the top is photographed from a TV screen. Only a bigger problem than that is that, and I confirmed this with the authorities in Houston, when the media were down there for the Apollo-Soyuz docking, they shot some shots of an old mock-up that NASA had paid to have made of the Apollo, the Soyuz, rather, craft that Apollo would be docking with. And when they got the data from Russia or the Soviet Union, whichever it was, I think it was the Soviet Union back then, when they got the data, they thought they were going to have a certain type of solar panels on there, and so NASA had the little model made with these solar panels. The problem is that before it was launched, they decided they could do better on the solar panels. They changed the design. And Semyazi's picture with the time scanner shows the old ones they planned to have, but they never sent up, that were in the model, that in fact the cameras were shooting in the entrance foyer in the building there, and he had clicked them with his camera and lied and said that they were taken from Semyazi's spacecraft. Bad luck, fellow, because you photographed a model that didn't even represent what was up there. Now, let me tell you what Wendell said. He said, well, Ray, I'm going to Switzerland next week. I'm going to be talking to Billy. I'm going to tell him about this and what you said. Well, guess what? He called me when he came back. He said, Ray, I told Billy, and he said that Semyazi has recalled all those photographs as evidence.
Oh, okay. Yeah. All right. Now, there's a couple of questions up here for you, and one of them is, why do you feel, this was someone that called and actually talked to you yesterday while I was here, and she wants to know, why do you feel sort of negative about the Hawking and rich Russian, millionaire announcement, the $100 million grant to search for
okay.
ET?
Well, Hynek said, of course, attempting to get radio signals from distant places in space is like the as yet unborn, the long dead communing with the as yet unborn. But furthermore, let's look at this. We are now at the point we are using RF in everything from our iPhones to you name it, but we have been using this a very short time. And a really very short time. Let's look at it at what, for example, experts that talk about the future of technology. If you get 50 years from us now, my God, what are we going to be doing? I'll make a prediction. I believe that we will abandon radio frequency. We find out in first place it is dangerous to our bodies, so much of it. And I believe that we will be using something we never have dreamed of. It might be akin to using certain quantum mechanical properties. Now, if you're into that, and if you read what's been discovered recently in this new Mason, I think it's the guy's name, he predicted in 1928, it starts with a W, I can't recall his name, but he had predicted a certain particle, a particle that has no mass. In 1938, they have just proven it exists. But the literature says that this will revolutionize everything we know in electronics and probably in communications, etc. Well, look here. When you make these kind of progresses in a short time, you're going to abandon RF communication, I believe. And I think that most advanced civilizations are way beyond smoke signals. I consider RF communication to be basically smoke signals compared to what an advanced technology would be using. So that's why I laugh at it. They're trying to do the same thing that the CT project has been doing for years, unsuccessfully apparently. And look, these guys are myopic. Why don't they look at the evidence? If they want to come over and see the evidence, I'll show them the movie films. I'll show them what I've got. There is something from somewhere else, I don't know where, that is an advanced technology that is coming here. And there is the evidence. When you have the advanced technology and the evidence of it, I mean, I not only have daylight films, but during some of these films, as you saw tonight, I have recordings of the extreme low frequency magnetic field simultaneously with a strange signal modulation on the recording gravimeter. Let me give you a little anecdote. Dr. Heineck one day called me and said, would you mind if I brought two flight seasoned astronauts, they had flown in space, over to talk to you at the project office in Austin? I said, I'd be delighted. So he brought the two astronauts over and was sitting there, and I said, Ray, tell them about all the equipment you have out there. And so he even showed them some of the pictures from some of my film on the wall. Here are these two flight-seasoned astronauts. And then I said, and by the way, we have a recording gravimeter. To my shock, both of these gentlemen sprang forward in their seats and leaned forward and almost said at the same time, that's where you're going to get the evidence. And they said it in a way that was not speculation. You could tell they knew something. But I'm not the type that asks people who've taken a security oath to tell secrets that they're supposed to keep. I don't believe in that. But I know enough from the way they reacted. And they kept on talking about it for maybe 5-7 minutes. They were so thrilled that I was using this. This shows me that the astronauts have been taught that these things are using a gravity-like effect. Now, let me say, this may not be a gravity wave as a physicist might think of it, but if you had if you were able to locally modulate the local passage of time and it were pulsed, this would be indetectable on our recording gravimeter from a gravity wave. I'm more inclined to think that's what we have recorded rather than gravity wave. But if you have that, you control your relationship to gravity, because in the equation, just for acceleration due to gravity, it's time rate of increase of velocity. So time is the major component in the equation. And so if you're controlling time, pulsing time, it's going to show up on a gravimeter as a gravity wave.
Right. We have a couple of questions up here, Ray. And in the second part of the show, I'm going to get Ray to actually talk about some discs. That he has some ancient discs that, I mean, they look exactly like flying saucers. We're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about a live landing that he was listening to on Apollo 14. I want to talk about that. Dr. Edgar Mitchell was on that flight. Alan Shepard was on that flight. And I actually want to find out if anyone actually can find the live recording that has not been altered from that. So the question up on the message board, and by the way, anyone can jump on the message board. It's at podcastufo.com. Easy sign in. And also there is a call-in capability here. That's 603-967-4030.
Okay. At the time, I was living...
I have no idea where that is coming from. Sorry about that, listeners. A question up on the chat room is, I'm wondering about connections between his psychic and channeling abilities and so many UFO sightings. Do you feel that they're related? And what do you think about channeling and UFO sightings?
Okay. Regarding channeling UFO sightings, years ago, when I was in my early 20s, I got involved in putting myself into an altered state and channeling some information. I want to be the first to say that this is a very dangerous preoccupation for the person doing it as well as those listening if they are believing and not objectively looking at the material. I, of course, know that there are psychic phenomena and there's precognition and that some psychic can pick up some things validly. My personal belief is that any advanced extraterrestrial race that comes here would have learned quickly enough about the fallibility of the human mind and its complexity that they wouldn't try to get messages to us by anybody, male or female, voice channeling. I believe that they would use something much more effective in getting their message through. Yes, I believe that psychics might be able to know how when a UFO might be around, whatever psychic ability or energy is, but I would prefer to think, based on my experience, you see, when I had that first experience the night of June 10th, 1954, I felt a strange kind of energy. The next day, when a skeptical friend of mine from down the street and I had a much better sighting in daylight, I felt the same weird thing. For years, I felt that this was a psychic awareness of these things around there. I was wrong. In 1978, the afternoon of July 19th and the night of July 19th. My project, with our mobile laboratory, including the recording magnetometer, gravimeter, telephoto cameras, movie cameras, and spectrographic cameras, and high-quality sound recording, at the advice of a government scientist at White Sands, we were told that they were plaguing White Sands, that we ought to get out there. And we went out there, and by the time we got to West Texas, we had incredible encounters. But with us was the wonderful man who was the major financier of our project. And after this first encounter, and then the second one, which we had one in West Texas and then in northern New Mexico, I said, even after the first one, I said, wow, did you feel that? I said, I felt it before. I said, I'd learned this over the years. I said, I think it must have been psychic. I could feel that before. I felt so excited and so good. And he said, well, I felt that too. My wife was with us. This is my former wife, not my present one of 29 years. And she said, yes, I felt it too. But the guy who was our chief financier, he said, but look, Ray, let me tell you something. He said, you know me. I'm as psychic as a brass doorknob. And I felt it too. He said, Ray, that was physiological. Turns out he was right. What we did, when we recorded these and filmed these night and day, and light spectra, sound, and so on and so forth. But when we got out to California, the corporation that built the system for us, and we analog graphed it and could look at the frequencies involved, we found that some of these frequencies are in the range of deep, restful sleep. We subsequently found from a hospital uninvolved in UFO research in Spain that they had determined that when these frequencies, as an extreme low frequency magnetic field, impinge upon the human nervous system and brain, that it tends to replicate them by unknown means and tends to copy them. And if you are experiencing this in a wakeful state, you feel wonderful. I call it euphoria, UFORIA, but it's like the word EUPHORIA, which means a false sense of well-being. Listen, my former wife, my present wife, my children, my son when he was 4, my eldest son, my daughter when she was 6, they knew when these things were around, and we'd all go out and see them and film them. They could sense this. It's physiological. I was wrong. It was not psychic. It was physiological. And anybody can train themselves. If you've had an encounter or two and know how to recognize this, you can train yourself. But I've got to tell you, there's a phenomenon this ties in with. You've heard the cases, all of you probably, that here's Joe is sound asleep, and Betty, his wife, has gotten up to go to the kitchen or the bathroom, and she sees strange things out the window. My God, there's a craft landing in the field out there. Oh, Joe, quick, there's something out here. She can't awaken Joe. He just snores away. She can't awaken him. Normally, Joe awakens at a pin drop. What's happening? It's impinging on his brain, and your brain gets to duplicate it, and it becomes so saturated with the deep restful sleep sequence, it's hard to wake you up. But if you are awake, it makes you feel totally rested and relaxed, and you feel this wonderful euphoria, UFORIA. And I'll tell you, if somebody wanted to take these recordings we have of the frequency and put them on a magnetic coil and generate them, but did the experiments hopefully blind, not knowing what's going on, and the experimenter blind as well as the experiment in the phone blind, I would predict that they can train people to recognize this frequency within a matter of hours, and you can become a walking, talking UFO detector. People say, Ray, why don't you make $1 million selling it? Well, I'm sorry. I'm not here to entertain. I'm here to do some science.
Yeah. All right, we just got a couple of minutes left, and there was a related question I had right on my mind. Let me just... someone is very... asked this question of all the guests, so they want to ask you as well, and that is, how do you feel about night vision and spotting UFOs?
Well, you might see something interesting with night vision, of course. But the trouble is, you don't know what it is. Every bug, every bird, every bat that flies through, and a lot of other things have infrared signatures. And I see these people showing these and saying this is an alien spacecraft. I've got UFOs. I've never seen one that was convincing at all. I say, sure, it's a tool. You can try to use it, but by golly, you better train yourself to not get hypnotized and to religiously convince yourself you've seen what you want to see. In this field, you need to stay objective and observe carefully. without conclusions. Note the details and analyze afterward. If you go to seeing something strange on the night vision or in the real sky, and you begin to, it's an alien spaceship, oh my God, do you know they might wave at me? They might scare the heck out of me. They might abduct me. They might use the anal probe on me. Well, let me tell you, you're going to get so damned hysterical and so subjective that you're going to misinterpret a lot of things, and you're not going to make a good report. You're not going to make a good reporter. And so people need to get objective. I don't care what instrument they got in front of them. The instrument does not do science. It records data. It is the observer, the analyst, that does the science. Don't forget that. Don't think that that's going to show you alien spacecraft. Please be objective.
Well, while we're giving advice, I heard you give these gentlemen advice earlier, or one of them here, Tony, you said to him, don't even think about your camera. Just pick it up and start taking pictures.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed. In fact, I had to teach my wife when I first married her. She asked me if I would show her as many UFOs as I showed my former wife, and I said, well, I sure will. The very next day, my kids and we all saw it. And she was amazed. But I had to train her, not when she sees something and it becomes convincing enough that, yes, if you think about it, you might be watching something that didn't originate here and that might be technological. Just watch it. If you see anything strange, don't ask yourself, is it a UFO, is it a plane? If it looks strange, start taking pictures. Carefully note the details. Otherwise, you can color yourself by what you wish to see rather than what you're seeing. Coldly, objectively analyze, and don't go assigning what it is. This is very, very important. And not only that, but if you go getting whipped up, oh my God, my wife and I were filming the most incredible mothership, according to the literature, this was on the 17th of March, 1989. We called it the Mac Mothership because actually the only place we could find to stop was a McDonald's restaurant, which I showed you today. Mm-hmm. And by golly, I'm watching it at 10 power at 20 power in a 1,000-millimeter telephoto. And I know from the start that it's nothing ordinary because I'm seeing it that power. But it took my wife a while looking at it. Well, this is so strange, but what is it? But all of a sudden, she got a good look at it, and she said to herself, oh, that is an alien craft. And then she screamed. This was silent. Then she screamed, oh, I made it go. And sure enough, I pressed my button on the camera and started taking pictures. I got 3 more pictures. But it vanished that fast as soon as she reflected on it and said, oh, an alien craft. And she doesn't do that anymore. She is cool and objective, as anyone of scientific mind should try to be.
Right. Well, that's it for this part of the show. If you're listening live, hang in there. We're just going to have a very quick music break. And if you are listening to the podcast and want to listen to the second part of the show, all it takes is $1 a month and more for support. You can find that information right on podcastufo.com. Hang in just one moment here.